Howdy whalers, and welcome back to Moby Dick Explained. When we last left Ishmael and Queequeg, the boys had just finished signing on to the Pequod, the whaling ship on which they'll spend the next 3 years. The boys need to get ready because the ship will be leaving soon enough, and we're really close to starting this voyage that we've been talking about. However, immediately after they sign on to the ship, the boys have a very strange encounter. That's what we'll talk about today in Chapter 19, The Prophet. This chapter opens with the boys just walking down the street, kinda lost in their own thoughts, when a bizarre stranger leaps into their path. He was but shabbily apparelled in faded jacket and patched trousers. A rag of a black handkerchief investing his neck. A confluent smallpox had in all directions flowed over his face and left it like the complicated ribbed bed of a torrent where the rushing waters have been dried up. In other words, he's seen better days. The stranger jabs his finger at the Pequod and he demands to know if Ishmael and Queequeg have signed on or shipped in her, is what he says. Ishmael tells the strange man, yeah, we're signed on, we just did the paperwork. And the man asks about the paperwork, anything down there about your souls? Ishmael is like, huh? Oh, perhaps you haven't got any, he said quickly. No matter though, I know many chaps that haven't got any. Good luck to them, and they are all the better off for it. A soul's a sort of fifth wheel to a wagon. The implication here may be being that men without souls are able to live a little freer, without morals or maybe fear of damnation or salvation. Ishmael is having none of this. He basically thinks, this guy's crazy, so why spend any time trying to untangle it? But then the man says this. He's got enough though to make up for all the deficiencies of that sort and other chaps, abruptly said the stranger, placing a nervous emphasis upon the word he. So who is the he here? It's a little ambiguous, but it certainly seems like the he this weird stranger is referring to is Captain Ahab. And what he seems to be implying is that Captain Ahab has so much soul, or such a powerful, focused, domineering soul, that it doesn't much matter if the men who are with him have their own. Ishmael doesn't understand this implication, and the man also sounds bonkers. If a stranger walked up to you in the street and started babbling the way this guy is, you would probably assume the same thing Ishmael assumes, which is, this man is broken loose from somewhere. But then the stranger specifically hones in on Captain Ahab. He asks Ishmael if he has met Old Thunder. Ishmael asks him, who? The stranger clarifies, Captain Ahab. Old Thunder is apparently a nickname some sailors have given to Ahab. That nickname alone communicates a lot of information about what kind of captain Ahab is. You don't get a nickname like Old Thunder unless you are a very specific type of person. It suggests that Ahab is loud or scary or bold, or that he comes down on his men like thunder. This matches up with what we've previously heard about Ahab in chapter 16, the ship. He was never very jolly. Ever since he lost his leg last voyage by that accursed whale, he's been kind of moody. Desperate moody, and savage sometimes. Ishmael tells the stranger, well, we haven't met him yet. We hear that he's sick, but he'll soon be all right. The stranger makes a kind of joke here where he goes, the day Ahab is all right, that's the day my left arm will be all right. Yuck, 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 yuck. Ishmael, who's getting more impatient by the moment, demands that the stranger tell him what he knows about Ahab. Instead of answering, the stranger just goes, well, what do you know about Ahab? Ishmael replies, well, not a lot, really. We know he's a good captain, and we've heard he's a good whale hunter. The stranger says, yeah, that's true, and a very exacting captain. You must jump when he gives an order. The stranger calls it step and growl, growl and go. But he continues, but nothing about that thing that happened to him off Cape Horn long ago when he lay for dead for 3 days and nights. Nothing about that deadly scrimmage with the Spaniard before the altar in Santa? Heard nothing about that, huh? Nothing about the silver calabash he spat into? And nothing about his losing his leg last voyage, according to the prophecy. Didn't ye hear a word about them matters and something more? There is a lot to unpack in this little passage. First, we don't get any details. What happened to Captain Ahab off Cape Horn? Why did he lay for dead? What scrimmage with what Spaniard? At what altar? The stranger doesn't elaborate on these stories. Mostly they just serve to paint in our minds that Ahab might be kind of a lunatic. The most important part of the passage is the part about Ahab losing his leg according to the prophecy. We have heard that Ahab lost his leg in a whale hunt, but what exactly is the prophecy? This is the first time in this book we are seeing the word prophecy. We heard from Peleg that somebody named Tistig said that Ahab's name would prove prophetic. But we haven't heard anything about a specific prophecy. And the stranger is not explaining it to us. But now we have the expectation that maybe somewhere, sometime later, somebody will? There is a supernatural implication in the idea that Ahab didn't lose his leg hunting a whale because sometimes when you hunt whales you lose your leg. He lost it because of a prophecy. If that's the case, then our pals are currently caught up in something much, much bigger than a whale hunt. Ishmael confronts him and says, yeah, we know all about the leg. We've heard the story. The stranger kind of takes a pause. And then he says, ye've shipped in her, have ye? Names down on the papers? Well, what's signed is signed, and what's to be will be. And then again, perhaps it won't be, after all. Anyhow, it's all fixed and arranged already, and some sailors or other must go with him, I suppose. As well these as any other men, God pity 'em. Basically, well, someone's gotta go. Might as well be you guys. Ishmael finally is like, listen dude, if you have something important to say, you need to say it. The stranger just kind of ignores him and makes an offhand comment about not getting on any of the ships himself. Ishmael says, my dear fellow, you can't fool us that way. You can't fool us. It is the easiest thing in the world for a man to look as if he had a great secret in him. The stranger just kind of rolls on. Ishmael stops him for his name. The stranger tells us his name is Elijah. Let's stop right there for a minute. We have talked a lot about the biblical references in Moby Dick. Back in chapter 16, there was something about Ahab we didn't really deep dive, but we're gonna do it now. It's an exchange between Ishmael and Peleg. Peleg says, he's Ahab, boy, and Ahab of old, thou knowest, was crowned a king. Ishmael replies, and a very vile one. When that wicked king was slain, the dogs, did they not lick his blood? In the Bible, Ahab is a king, and he was a very bad king. He did many, many things that angered God. In fact, we can get the summary straight from the Bible. 1 Kings 16:33. I'm not sure how you're supposed to say Bible chapters. If you know anything about the Bible, that probably makes sense to you. 1 Kings 16:33. And Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel that had come before him. Melville maybe named his captain after this biblical, horrible king. Why? What does it mean to us as readers? One idea, Ahab was an idolater. He built an altar to a false god. That's one of the things he did to upset real God. In many ways, our own Captain Ahab is also an idolater. He is obsessed with, almost to the point of worship, the white whale. Like the king he's possibly named for, he has turned his eye away from God, and he is focused in on his own obsession, which raises the question of, what exactly is the difference between obsession and worship? Quick side note, idols and totems are a recurring theme in Moby Dick. Don't forget that we have come upon this idolater of a captain as a direct result of our own little idol, Yojo, who told Queequeg that Ishmael should choose the ship. Anyway, back to the chapter. Let's talk about Elijah. In the Bible, Elijah is a prophet. Specifically, he is the prophet who repeatedly warns King Ahab to knock it off. In fact, Elijah is the prophet who tells King Ahab that when he dies, dogs will lick his blood up. The very same story we just heard referenced in Peleg and Ishmael's conversation. So what does it mean? Does it matter? Is it important? As of right now, it's hard to say. What we know is that this chapter is titled The Prophet, and we know there's a biblical link between the names, and that in the Bible, the things that Elijah told Ahab would come to pass did. His prophecies were true. At the very least, that should be telling us as readers that this dude might not be that crazy. He might know something we don't. In fact, some of the details that he has provided to us seem as though he's possibly shipped out with Captain Ahab in the past. Even without the Bible and the prophecies and all that stuff, Elijah might actually know something about the captain of the Pequod. Elijah doesn't share any more information right now. He just kind of follows Ish and Queequeg creeping around like a weirdo. This whole thing has Ishmael kind of shook. This circumstance, coupled with his ambiguous, half-hinting, half-revealing, shrouded sort of talk, now begat in me all kinds of vague wonderments and half-apprehensions, and all connected with the Pequod, and Captain Ahab, and the leg he had lost, and the Cape Horn fit, and the silver calabash, and what Captain Peleg had said of him when I left the ship the day previous, and the prediction of Tistig, and the voyage we had bound ourselves to sail, and 100 other shadowy things. He's basically thinking, man, every time I hear something about this guy, it's something weird. And that seems bad. And this is a good time to introduce our new segment, Omen Check! Hey everyone, and welcome to Omen Check. For those of you keeping score at home, let's do a quick rundown on all the not-so-good omens our old pal Ishmael has encountered on his journey so far. Number 1, extracts as a whole, Jonah, the whale, and all the spooky stories about whale hunts gone bad. Number 2, Chapter 1, Loomings. Ishmael describes the whale as a grand hooded phantom. Spooky. Number 3, Chapter 2, The Carpet Bag. Ishmael visits an inn named after a whale's spout run by a man named Peter Coffin. Number 4, Chapter 3, The Spouter Inn. Ishmael encounters a boggy, soggy, squitchy picture that appears to him as an image of a whale impaling itself on the mast of a ship. Number 5, Chapter 5, Breakfast. Ishmael sits down with a bunch of experienced whalemen who do not regale themselves with adventurous, fun stories, but instead sit in solemn silence. To sit in solemn silence in a dull, dark dock in a pestilential prison with a lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a sharp, sharp shock from a cheap and chippy chopper on a big black block, a dull, dark dock, a lifelong lock, a sharp, sharp shock, a big black block, to sit in solemn silence in a pestilential prison and awaiting the sensation from a cheap and chippy chopper on a big black block. Number 6, Chapter 7, The Chapel. Literally, the gravestones and tablets of dead whalemen observed under a howling gale. Number 7, Chapter 9, The Sermon. Father Mapple tells us the tale of Jonah and the whale, a story about a man who was eaten by a whale. Number 8, Chapter 15, Chowder. The sign to the tripods looks like a gallows. Number 9, Chapter 16, The Ship. The ship is a specter of death and a literal coffin. It is a wooden thing filled with the bones of dead stuff. And number 10, Chapter 19, The Prophet. A guy walks up to you in the street and asks you if you've signed your soul over to the journey you are about to undertake, who seems as though he might have possibly taken the same journey on the same ship with the same captain, and he has emerged from that journey with severe psychological and physical damage. To quote every comic relief Hawaiian shirt wearing character in every bad action movie ever made, I have a bad feeling about this. Anyway, Ishmael is resolved to go on this journey. So 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 stories about how crazy his captain is and the horrors of whaling, it's not going to stop him. Besides, he's signed, and it's almost time to ship out. And we'll get just a little bit closer next time when we talk about Chapter 20, All Astir, and possibly Chapter 21, Going Aboard. I'm not really sure if Chapter 20 is enough for its own video, so I guess we'll see. Until I see you again, please be good, be kind, don't kick any puppies, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out our Patreon and leave me comments about Moby Dick. I love reading your comments about Moby Dick, so leave comments.